last lecture, we mentioned that the fair information practices have been interpreted differently across the world, and that's certainly the case. We're going to look at examples of four interpretations. We're going to look at the OECD Guidelines, Convention 108, the APEC Privacy Framework, and the Madrid Resolution. This is a timeline of the FIPs from the time they were first published in 1973 in the Hugh Report all the way up until 2009. We see the publication of the OECD Guidelines in 1980, Convention 108 in 1981, the APEC Privacy Framework in 2004, and the Madrid Resolution in 2009. OECD stands for Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. The OECD Guidelines were first published in 1980 and revised most recently in 2013. The shorthand form of the document is just referred to as the OECD Guidelines. The full title of the document is Guidelines on the Protection of Privacy and Trans-Border Flows of Personal Data. The OECD Guidelines have principles, and I've listed them here. Most of these, I feel, are either self-explanatory or we've already discussed them. Collection limitation is just what it sounds like. This is limiting the amount of data that's collected. Essentially, don't collect data that you don't need for the specific business need. An example would be social security number. If I don't need your social security number in order to provide you with goods or services, then I'm not going to collect it. Collecting data that we don't need not only increases the threat of a privacy harm for the individual, but also increases the liability for the organization. Data quality, which we spoke about before. Purpose specification. This just means being very specific with regards to why we're collecting this information. What do we need it for? Use limitation. This is similar to no secondary use. You'll remember from the previous lecture that no secondary use means I'm going to collect your data for one reason, and I'm only going to use it for that one reason. I'm not going to use it for 2, 3, 4, 5 reasons that I think up for another time. Security safeguards, which we're going to talk about shortly. These are essentially the administrative, technical, and physical safeguards that we put in place to safeguard your data. Think about the servers that data resides on nowadays. Those servers are not going to be in an unlocked data center. The data center is going to be guarded. There are going to be locks all around the servers themselves. You're going to need a badge to get in, maybe login and password as well. Those are examples of different safeguards, and we'll talk more about those soon. Individual participation means getting the data directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak. If I want information about you, I'm going to come to you for that information. I'm not going to get it from a relative or a friend or from social media. Individual participation also means that the individual has an opportunity to access and amend their records, and we've spoken about that. The last two terms here, I feel, are not apparent just on the word itself. Openness here means transparency, and accountability means that the organization has designated an individual or group of individuals who are accountable for implementing and adhering to the principles. Convention 108 is the shorthand name for the Council of Europe's Convention for the Protection of Individuals with regard to automatic processing of personal data. Quite a mouthful. Convention 108 has 4 FIPs that we need to be concerned with. Quality of data, which we've talked about before. Special qualities. In a previous lecture, we referred to this as sensitive personal information. For example, race, political opinions, religious beliefs, health, sexuality, and criminal background. Data security refers to the safeguards we have in place to protect the data. And Convention 108 also refers to trans-border data flows. As it says here, privacy concerns will not interfere with transfer between parties of the convention. Just for clarity, APEC stands for Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, and it's constituted by 21 member economies throughout Asia and the Americas. The APEC Privacy Framework was established in 2004, and we'll see here that these are principles we've seen in other places already. Notice, collection limitation, choice, integrity of personal information, security safeguards, access and correction, and accountability. The only one here that probably requires further clarification is integrity of personal information. This is referring to data quality or data integrity. We want to make sure that the data that we have on individuals is accurate and up to date. Two other principles that you need to know about that belong to the APEC privacy framework are preventing harm and use of personal information. In the APEC framework, preventing harm means that we're identifying and mitigating risk. We do have a lecture coming up on risk management where I'm going to talk about these concepts in more depth. And use of personal information means no secondary use, purpose specification. Those are principles we've already come across. And finally, the Madrid Resolution, which was enacted in 2009. This refers to the International Conference of Data Protection and Privacy Commissioners, which was constituted by data protection authorities from 42 countries. And the title for the Madrid Resolution is International Standards on the Protection of Personal Data and Privacy. That's the full name. The Madrid Resolution has the following practices: purpose specification, data quality, openness, lawfulness and fairness, proportionality, and accountability. The last three here we need to expand a little bit in order to fully understand them. Lawfulness and fairness refers to respecting the rights, freedoms, and laws. Proportionality here means data minimization. Data minimization is collection limitation. So again, we're only collecting the information that we need. If I don't need your social security number, then I'm not going to collect it. And finally, accountability. These are the appropriate safeguards. In this lecture, we've looked at global interpretation of the FIPs, the Fair Information Practices. We looked specifically at the OECD Guidelines, Convention 108, the APEC Privacy Framework, and the Madrid Resolution. There's a lot of overlap between these. I feel like the most important thing to take away for the exam is being able to tell the difference between all of the different terminology, right? If you know what purpose specification and no secondary use and notice and choice and consent and etc. If you can define those key terms, then you should be good to go.